Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. I'm Mike Catalano, joined by Channel 7 in Buffalo Sports Director MATT BOVE. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You know, Jenna will yell at me.
I was going to say it. I thought you were going to introduce me, and I was going to do the whole Jenna Dan thing, like, comment, subscribe. I was ready.
Yeah, well, it worked anyhow. We got it in there twice right in the beginning. All right, we are at Bills OTAs. It's their game planning for the Jets, only a few months off. They're getting themselves ready. This is the off season. So we look at a lot of times big picture things, right? Because we're still pretty far off. Got to hear from Ken Dorsey today.
Yep.
Talking about the overall offense, talking about some of the new guys, certainly Dalton Kincaid. What was your overall feel of hearing from Ken Dorsey, what he had to say, a lot about some of the things that happened last year and as it progresses to this year?
I think he knows that they need to evolve. I think he realizes that last year they kind of hit a point in the midway where they just did not seem like they were cohesive. It did not seem like they were clicking. He specifically asked about that, and he gave the cop-out answer of you just need to score one more point than your opponent. Of course, we know that. They won a lot of those games, but for a lot of those games, it felt like the offense just wasn't what it's capable of being. I remember we had a conversation in Detroit in the press box, and I think I looked at you and I said, does Ken Dorsey make it out of this weekend? They were losing to the Browns early in the game. The offense was a disaster. Then the next week they go against the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving, and in that game they struggled too until the very end. I think Ken Dorsey needs to prove himself this year. I think he will because he's got a lot of new toys that he can play with, but I think this is a big season for them. I just think they need to be better from start to finish.
Yeah, I think you can get fooled by numbers, especially with this team, especially how many points they score. Those games are a good example. The games late in the year are a good example. When they were struggling for a lot of those against the Patriots, they ended up with 2 kick returns to win that game. That Dolphins game in the playoffs, they struggled. Now they found a way. And you know what happened most of the time. How did they find a way? Usually it was Josh Allen. Josh being Josh. I think you want those moments. You need that. He's your superstar. You're paying him all this money. He's still got to make those plays. But if you don't come up with a better, I would say, things you can count on.
Yeah.
We talked about that all the time, especially in key situations. Red zone and third down. It became Josh make a play. You think Dorsey is locked in enough on that, at least based on what we're hearing from him?
I think he is because I think he's probably self-aware enough to realize that those areas are things that need to be cleaned up because even though they didn't cost them many times last year, they could have. And a lot of those games are coin flips. We talk about, hey, the Bills can't win these one-score games. That was a whole conversation 2 years ago. Last year they won a bunch of them, but these mistakes are the reasons why sometimes you lose those games that are close at the end. I think of when Brian Daboll was here, Dawson Knox was always the option in the red zone, especially at the end. When Diggs and Gabe Davis were covered, you knew Dawson Knox was going to be where they were looking. Last year, they had all of the red zone concerns. And then the third down stuff, I think a lot of that is Cole Beasley, guys in the middle of the field. They weren't as good last year in that area, so that brings in Dalton Kincaid. So, yes, I think he realizes that those need to be 2 areas that they focus on. And I think from a personnel standpoint, they kind of tried to address that. I don't know if Dalton Kincaid was always the plan, but the way they talk about him, it seems like that's going to be his bread and butter. Have him in the middle of the field, go find space. If it's 3rd and 6, guess what? We're getting 7. Move the chains.
Well, we walked out to practice, and first thing we saw was a pass to Kincaid. I said to you, well, that guarantees 100, 150 targets this year, right?
Yeah, oh my gosh. Just draft him right now in fantasy if you can.
Last thing on offense. When I look at this wide receiver position, Stephon Diggs. Now, he's not here. That's that whole conversation. It's OTAs, and we're not going to worry about that. But I have so many question marks about the rest of the wide receiver position. There's an easy way to fix that, right? It's just with a big old check and some movement in the cap. What do you think?
I saw Brandon Beane and Ken Dorsey having a little conversation off to the side today. Maybe they were talking about something. Maybe they were talking about nothing. I think that if you're the Bills, you need to look into it. He immediately makes you better. He is one of those guys that if the Chiefs go sign DeAndre Hopkins, Bills fans are going to sit here and they're going to go, oh no, this can't happen. This is awful. You want your team to be making those moves. You want them in Kansas City to see the Bills sign him and go, oh no, how are we going to stop Diggs, Hopkins, Davis, Kincaid, Knox? It's very clear he wants to be here. He has hinted at it time and time again. I think you're probably competing with those other big teams. You're probably competing with the Jets. You're competing with the Chiefs. Maybe you're competing with, I don't know, are there any teams that I'm really missing?
No, I think you're also competing with teams that don't matter, like the Houston Texans.
Yeah, the Patriots.
Maybe to the Patriots to that extent too. Yeah, look, you're saying to yourself, if he signs with the Dallas Cowboys, that's fine. I'd still say I still have a lot of question marks. I mean, you wouldn't want him on one of the other top teams. You wouldn't want him on the Jets or the Chiefs in that way. But at the same time, let's say he does sign with an NFC team, because the Giants or wherever he decides to go. I just have so many concerns about the wide receiver position with this team.
Without DeAndre Hopkins, they are a middle-of-the-road wide receiver group, even though they have a premier player in Stephon Diggs. He's a top 5 receiver in the NFL. Even with him, they are a middle-of-the-road group. With DeAndre Hopkins, you go from middle-of-the-road to maybe one of the best in the NFL. Yeah. You look at probably the Bengals, the Eagles, then maybe it's you. Yeah. You would have some really great options. You love Deontay Hardy and Trent Sherfield as your 4-5. You don't love them as your 3-4 and one injury away from having to play very meaningful snaps. Like today, out at practice, no Stephon Diggs, no Gabe Davis. We get a really good look at Trent Sherfield. That's good right now. You don't want that to be the case week 4, week 5, or even worse, in the playoffs.
Yeah, my favorite line, I use it all the time, Marv used to say, depth is a great thing until you need to use it.
I love that line.
Right? So you want the starters to be the best. All right, let's move to defense. Hey, we always get excited at training camp when there's a position battle. Sometimes we make them up just to have something. Yeah. I think we're going to have a position battle this year.
I think we're going to have the biggest position battle this year we've probably had in the last several years. When you talk about middle linebacker, my dad tells me all the time how worried he is about the Bills losing Tremaine Edmunds. He goes, Matt, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't think they right now know what they're going to do, but that's going to make these next couple months so fun. I would think right now, who do you think the leader in the clubhouse is for the job? I think I would say Dodson.
Yeah, because they're comfortable with him. He started games. Again, this is what you go to. Somebody else has to win it. I'll put it to you this way. If it is Dodson, it's because none of these other guys were ready, right? I think that's physically, I think they can find a way. They talked about, Bob Babich was talking about the mechanics of the position. It is, we laugh about that stuff, but it is calling the plays, getting everybody set. I mean, that is a big part of what Tremaine has done for this team. And I think Dodson could walk in there week 1 and do it. I think they want one of the young guys to be stepping into that.
Yeah, and I do think that one of the things that Bobby Babich said that I thought was really interesting when he was talking about how the way the game has evolved, and everybody's going to bring up size. Like, how do you replace this massive human Tremaine Edmunds with an undersized linebacker like Terrell Bernard or an undersized linebacker like Dorian Williams? Well, the game has evolved so much over the years that maybe they are looking for somebody who can be a little bit bigger of an impact player in coverage as opposed to stopping the run. Times have changed. You're looking for as many ways as you can to stop the Chiefs and to stop the Bengals and even the Dolphins, because they like to spread everything around and use their speed. Undersized linebackers, what we thought about them 5 years ago is very different than the way they're utilized right now. That's why Matt Milano is such a great playmaker. I think if it's close, you go with one of the young guys. I think right now I would probably, of the young guys, give the advantage to Bernard just because he's been around a year, and this group has been very, very slow to throw rookies just right in there. So, yeah, it's a huge position battle, and I really don't know which way it's going to end.
Am I way off board? I mean, it used to be 3 linebackers on the field all the time. Then it's 2. They play somebody in the slot all the time. Am I off board to be saying, could you play with, in certain circumstances, with Milano as the only linebacker on the field and bring in Rapp, bring in Benford, bring in more coverage guys? I'm saying there would be opportunities to really go heavy. Is that what we're going to transform to eventually in the NFL?
I don't know about that. I don't know about eventually. But I do think with the pieces that they have now, we could see a lot more versatility than they've had in years past. I don't know if we're ever going to get to that point, but you could have just Milano and Taron Johnson out there, because Taron Johnson is kind of like a quasi-linebacker anyway.
Right.
And then you can do a bunch of different things with Taylor Rapp or Saran Neal or whoever it may be. I don't know if we're going to get that far, at least in the short term, but I think that Sean McDermott is going to have a lot of different things, a lot of different tools in his toolbox that he can try to utilize this year, which is why I don't think it's important, but that's why I don't think it's like the biggest deal in the world that they're losing Edmunds. He's a really good player. We would like to have him back, but I think there are going to be ways around it. I also think, too, a healthy Von Miller at some point and a healthy Micah Hyde having those guys back makes your defense better as a whole than just taking out Edmonds.
Yeah, no question. It has to. They'll have that stability that they didn't have, certainly, at the end of the year. Hey, so it's patience is really what the thing is. Defense, they're trying to figure out at whatever point it's going to be that linebacker, and offense, letting these wide receivers battle until DeAndre Hopkins signs.
Yeah,
And then
we'll do another video.
If he signs today, we'll let you know. All right, that's going to do it for us. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. For our friend Matt Bove from Channel 7 in Buffalo, you can watch him. And what's the podcast called again?
It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. Do you actually not know the name of it?
Yeah, I do, but I wanted you to say it.
I appreciate it. It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. Give us a like.
I subscribe. I
listen.
subscribe to the pod.
Like,
I download
comment,
the
subscribe.
That'll do it for us. We'll see you next time here on Buffalo Plus.